quickly just tell me, how do you think things went tonight, and how did you?
How did it go?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I liked this much better than the other debate that I had with Vocab. I felt I can speak about my feelings all day long. I don't have to research them. I don't know how interesting it is for people to hear that, but it's something that's definitely much more comfortable for me than trying to debate a couple of pastors. But I enjoyed it. I think that I had a better feeling about it. I felt just positive, and I think it's good for people to see that we can be friends regardless of our different viewpoints, and we should be. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Angry. All right. Interview. So overall, how did you feel tonight went?
It was fun. I enjoyed it, and it's been nice to be with everybody.
Thank you.
I never told you. I made myself one of the shirts, but I put another 2 here.
Oh, you never told me that part. I knew you had one, but I never heard about that. That's very easy. I wore it. Whenever when you were ready. What was I gonna say?
Your first expression about how it went tonight, how was it?
Oh.
Yeah, actually.
Funky what?
Say what? Fat fish.
Fat face. Fish pics.
So, Vocab, how do you think it was tonight?
I don't think it's a great game. I was in it.
Tonight's discussion about can atheists and Christians be friends went well, I think. A lot of people came, and anytime you can share the gospel, even if it's in tidbits, in a crowd setting, is good. And I think people could see we were legitimate friends, like we really liked each other, but yet we really could talk about disagreeing things, sometimes strongly, in a very honest way. I was pretty honest. I want to say brutal, but they handled it. The crowd seemed to handle it. We had some weird people ask questions, but that made it fun. And we want to do stuff like this again. I want to get some of my Muslim friends out here, but they won't do it on a Friday night. So I don't know how I would do that.
Thursday night.
Thursday night, yeah.
Thursday night where it's at.
The atheists, they get boring after a while, but they're all right. They're all right. I'd like to do debates out here eventually, like actually. But who wants to do that?
Cars run over the end of it.
Omar doesn't want to do that.
Cars turning right.
Wade doesn't want to do that.
They like to rush the corners.
If I can find someone that'll do it, that'd be fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it was a perfect first time out of the gate, and I praise my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Thank you.
Comes in. Scripture talks about us being adopted as sons and daughters into God's family, and so there should be special bonds and connections with other Christians. That's a reality, and I would say that cannot be duplicated because there's not the true spiritual kinship that you can have that you can have with a Christian that you can have with an unbeliever. So there's some kind of a natural, real sort of theological reason, but there's other reasons that I don't think are good reasons. Like someone may say, what fellowship has light with darkness? But see, again, as we looked at Jesus for a model, is that the way he lived out that type of view? I don't think so. So I think there's sort of legitimate reasons by default by what Christianity is, but there's also illegitimate uses of that. And I don't think Jesus modeled that type of insularity, we keep on using that word, as some people do today. There's really two things. One is, Jesus looked out on the crowds and saw that they were like sheep without a shepherd. He legitimately had compassion for them, those that were that we're not His. And I do feel a certain burden that I really do care for these guys, and I really would love to see them come to the Lord. So it sounds cheesy, but sometimes it can be slightly painful because they're so cool to me. I would love to see them in that condition. And this is slightly less related, but the other thing is, and this will sound weird, but let me bring it up. When we talk about certain ethical issues, sometimes there can be challenges because of sharp disagreements. The key one is abortion. Sometimes I find my atheist friends have a cavalier, troubling attitude about it. That I have to do everything I can to not be bothered by it. And I want to try to be honest, because I thought how I would answer that, and that's a true thing for me.
That vocab doesn't always admit I'm right is definitely a barrier in our friendship.
Wait, I don't do what? What'd he say?
That you don't always admit that he's right.
Oh, well, I'm on the right tonight. This is the stage right. So by default, I'm just kidding. We did that on purpose.
That's very problematic for me. There's one of the things that, at least in my perception of it, it's interesting that vocab had brought up abortion. I don't personally feel I've ever been cavalier about it, and I don't necessarily think you're referring to either one of us personally.
I have been.
Omar more so than you with this issue.
Okay. There's often seems like a kind of an emotional disconnect when it comes to the suffering of others, despite there being institutional religious movement, in terms of charity. When it comes right down to connecting with people who are suffering, who are victims of war, things like that, it has sometimes seemed that it's easier for those on the theistic side to justify that kind of thing. And that's, speaking of things that have the potential to, heat me up. When I sense a Christian sort of drifting away from that connection, when I ask a question like, how would you feel if you were in this position? If whatever the position of suffering might be, that a Christian might justify, whether it's a biblical situation, whether it's a real life, current event situation. When I see that drifting away from empathy and connection, I find that pretty annoying. That can be a barrier.
What's difficult? The difficult thing for me with any friendship is when somebody is unreasonable, and that I've met plenty of unreasonable atheists. I've met unreasonable Christians, and I have a hard time being friends with them. I consider myself a reasonable person, sometimes more reasonable than others, but when someone starts out assuming they know something about you or about your viewpoint, and they don't even give you the opportunity to explain your position, they've already made up their mind, or no matter what you say, they think they know you. That could be a Christian or an atheist or a Scientologist. It could be anybody. That's the thing that's difficult, and maybe because I have gone out of my way at many times to have conversations with Christians. I have met many of those people, but I've met many of those people that were atheists too. So I just think that if we can be reasonable, if we can, even if we don't see eye to eye, if we can let the other person express their viewpoint instead of assuming we know what it is, then we can have genuine friendships, we can have real conversation, and I think we can improve society. So
Danger that friendships between atheists and Christians could be detrimental to either party, and if so, what would be your concern?
I have this sense that the dangers perceived more from the Christian side. I I know that we all have a tendency to be fundamentally biased. And I don't mean biased in the prejudicial sense, but I mean in the psychological sense. So more than self-deceptive, you know, we perceive reality very often in a kind of a skewed way, and it guides our beliefs. So there's a danger from all over the place, not just from Christians or you know, any other theistic group. I don't personally see a danger. You know, I see my relationships with Christians and anybody else I have is more or less fulfilling. But Christians can speak to the other side of that for themselves.
All right, Vocab, would you?
The real danger I see for the Christian is sort of different than what you might think. It's the Christian becoming complacent. So, you know, this is my friend, I enjoy them. Let's just not talk about this other stuff because we might fight, we might argue, they might not like me. To me, actually, the real danger is the sort of complacency that we can go into, which to me ultimately would demonstrate a lack of caring. Because it's inconvenient to bring the things up. But that's the beautiful thing about Omar and Wade. They don't say, hey, we can be friends, we can, you know, talk about Star Trek together. That's more Wade. I like Star Wars more, but we can still sort of talk about Star Trek together, Wade and I. But just don't, you know, don't bring up any your God stuff, and we can be friends. They don't do that. If they did, I think we would hang out less. I think our relationship would be more shallow. But to me, the real danger is the Christian becoming complacent and lackadaisical in the friendship.
So you're saying that you want to talk about significant issues?
Yes.
Omar, if you had a Christian friend who didn't want to talk about significant issues, would that impact your friendship with them?
If they didn't want to talk about God?
Right. If they just said, I don't want to hear from you, and I won't.
I'm probably most of my friendships, including with atheists, I don't talk about God. It's not. I'm interested in a lot of things. I happen to be interested in religion. That's sort of the main bond that I have with Vocab. But I'm interested in a lot of other things, and none of my friendships, I would say, are based only on one interest. I would think those would be really uninteresting friendships if that were the case. So, what was the question?
I was just trying to get at whether or not talking about significant issues, not necessarily God, but Vocab seemed to be saying that one of the reasons he enjoys his friendship with the two of you is because you do have the ability to talk about significant issues.
Oh, yeah, and I have plenty of Christian friends, religious friends who know my viewpoints and they have no interest in discussing them with me, and that's fine. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. I don't think friends do that. Go out of their way to hurt one another. I do appreciate being challenged. Not everybody does, and if your friend doesn't want to be challenged, then being a good friend means you probably shouldn't challenge them, I would say. And Vocab might disagree with that.
Bob, I'm sorry, can I interject something here?
You can wade in.
I can. Thank you.
Sorry,
Vocab.
I was waiting
I'll
all
wade
night.
in. Nobody has ever. Back to, you know, the danger issue. A question I'd have for Vocab is Vocab, what is the danger? What happens to Christians when they become complacent in their friendships with non-Christians?
Oh wait, okay. Yeah.
Why is complacency problematic?
Because ultimately I would say it demonstrates a lack of love. If you're no longer concerned, if you no longer care, and just sort of enjoy having, well, I'll say a more shallow or superficial friendship, then do you really believe what you believe? If I really believe men and women by virtue of sin are under the wrath of God, how can I not care about those who are? It just seems inconsistent. So that's mainly what I mean. To me, that's a bigger concern than other considerations that we might have. Because I want Christians to be challenged in their beliefs and have good talking partners like you guys. I mean, it's just a sad thing. It's sad when Christians aren't willing to go deep. And I'm not saying I'm there, I always do that, but they need to be willing to have the atheist say, give me one good reason why, or they need to be okay with that and ready to roll. But I think complacency is a danger because it shows a lack of concern and a lack of an eternal perspective. Does that help?
No.
No?
No.
Omar, can you help me translate what I'm trying to say? Bob, can you help me I don't know what else to say.
I understand what you're saying. I mean, I understand why that would be, as a Christian, that would be something that would concern you. It's just not something that I have to deal with, I guess.
Right.
Would you be concerned that someone might lose their faith and move away from their faith in their community, in their complacency?
If that happens, it would go back to what we talked about earlier. I think atheists can be effective. This is going to sound so calloused. I just don't know any other way to do it. Just take my word that I'm generally an okay person or something like that. Atheists are effective at flicking off the fence sitters that are not legitimately his sheep. And that is okay with me. Because at least then we know who's who. I'm sorry for my callousness. But you guys are like, you can be effective snipers, assassins, you know, picking off the weak of the herd, right? Something like that.
It's funny you say that because that was, I think I'd heard something along those lines from you a long time back, a while back, with regard to
debates?
The effectiveness of debates.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's not necessarily so much about getting the right perspective out there is bumping the fence setters.
Partially. Like, I'm not saying, I'm just saying...
If nothing else.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, it's naive to be like, it's naive to think that here's professing Christian X, here's atheist Y, they're friends. It's naive to think, as that happens millions of times over, that professing Christian X becomes like atheist Y. That's gonna happen. That's a reality. And I'm not saying that's what we want the end goal to be, but I'm saying I understand, respect, and accept that. So I don't think the Christian needs to be scared. If the Christian is scared of being friends with the atheist or someone like them, then they need to shore up. They need to shore up what they believe. We shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't have fear of being challenged. We should be okay to say, you know, I don't know. Like I talked to you about physics. I don't claim to be like, well, you know, I just put on my listening hat and I say, wait, tell me about physics because I got a lot to learn. With Omar...
And I get all enthusiastic and nerdy and ridiculous.
With the physics conversation the other day, yeah, and that's all right. So it's insecurity and a lack of sort of putting in due diligence that would make the Christian be frightened of those end results, and I don't think we should have that.
Vocab, would Jesus be a friend with an atheist? And then
while we were yet sinners, Christ showed his love to us by dying for us. That's Romans 5. Jesus was accused during his day in the first century in Palestine of being demon-possessed for being friends with so many naughty people. I'm not saying, you guys, you're not a tax collector, are you? Neither of you? I don't think they are. I know Wade used to work for the government. That's all right. Not a tax collector, not a publican. But Jesus was friends with those folks, and that was bad back then. So my point is, yes, he would be a friend to atheists, and guess what? And it sounds cheesy, but he is a friend to atheists, even now.
Omar, how would you handle that question?
Dude. And I think he would be friends with atheists. Based on my understanding of him, he was friends with all kinds of unsavory people, because those are the interesting people. Sometimes. So, yeah, I think so.
Wade?
Yes, I believe he would be. Sorry, I don't have a more in-depth answer than that.
It's all right.
I agree, though, yes.
Wade, continue on then. We're coming to the end. We're going to go to questions in a few minutes, but I thought it'd be good to give each one of you just a short summary, just a couple of minutes each at the most. What else you want to say to the audience or to the other two panelists?
Does anybody mind if I throw a quotation out there from like Martin Buber?
Do it, homie.
Right on. And would one of you read it for me, please? All right, thank you, Martin Buber. And this is from, I'll just give a brief background on it. In 1923, Martin Buber, who was a friend of Zionism, he wrote much of the history of Hasidic Judaism, would have been considered a Jewish mystic, an intellectual born in Austria, 1876, died in 1975. He had an experience, a very transformative experience, roughly around the time of World War I, that kind of defined his sense of responsibility to his fellow man. And he went on to write a book called I and Thou, and published it in 1923. And this is a piece from it. It's a little arcane, it's a little old-fashioned in the way it sounds, but I think it's particularly beautiful as far as friendship and relation is concerned.
I and thou take their stand not merely in relation, but also in the give and take of talk. Here, what confronts us has blossomed into the full reality of the thou. Here alone, then, in human friendship, as reality that cannot be lost, are gazing and being gazed upon, knowing and being known, loving and being loved.
Thank you. Omar, final thoughts? Or, I'm sorry, Wade, did you want to continue to add to that?
No, apart from that, I think it's in relation, you know, whether we're Christians or non-Christians or non-theists, that's at the bottom of it. That's the most important thing, is our human connection. And though many of us won't see that as necessarily divine and profound, I personally see it that way. And it fills up that space, you know, that might have once been the Christian part of me. And it's a good thing.
Frank Clark. I don't have any biographical information about Frank Clark. I just like this quotation. He said, "We find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't." And ultimately, that's what everybody needs, is friends that comfort them and friends that force them to grow. And I hope we can all have friends like that. That's what it's all about, I think.
Let me close with one more anecdote, which is the night I debated Omar in Tempe on a Friday night, and then he had already invited me to a party the next day at his friend's house on a Saturday. So we debated each other for 2.5 hours on Friday night, and then Saturday we were hanging out at a friend's house, which was pretty surreal, pretty cool, and it was just so funny because a lot of people in the party were like, "Hey Omar, you know, how'd your debate thing go?" Da, da. And he's like, "Well, the guy's right here." And it's just like, this is strange. But I love that experience, and I think that's a good way, a good snapshot of what these relationships can be like. And it's gonna take some love on both sides. And so you guys ended with a quotation. If I may end with a quotation from 1 Corinthians 13 about what's going to make this really work. And again, I know it sounds like a Hallmark card, but it's the Bible, so it's not a Hallmark card. 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. Then skipping down to verse 13. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And that's what's going to be the glue to make this stuff work.
Thank you. And Vocab, Omar, and Wade, if the audience appreciates their efforts to come out and have this talk, let's give them a round of applause. We're going to just take...
It's like saying that people...
Yeah. Where are they? There's people talking.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
How are you?
Good, how are you?